Welcome back to Flashbacks. I'm Tony from CBFU, and today we're going to be covering the Flash vs. Arrow crossover event. In the opening shots of this episode, we see Barry Allen going around helping random citizens of Central City. One of them happens to be painting a homeless shelter which is being built by Ray Palmer, who we saw debut earlier this season in Arrow. They went with an odd choice for villain in this episode with Roy G. Bigelow, better known as Rainbow Raider. Now in the comics he got his start as a Flash villain who was at one point a member of the Rogues. He used goggles to emit light to change people's emotions. In the show they made him a metahuman and made him a little more serious. I felt like the show actually was a better representation than the character has ever gotten before. But what's really interesting to note is that they tied him to the emotional spectrum established in the Green Lantern universe. Speaking of the emotional spectrum, it runs as follows. Red is rage, orange is greed, yellow is fear, green is will, blue is hope, indigo is compassion, violet is love. And they each represent a different Lantern Corps. Now in this episode, the latter half of the spectrum, from green to violet, is actually the colors that they use to snap Barry out of his rage-induced fight with Oliver. As Oliver and Felicity are leaving Central City, Ollie runs into an ex of his that he doesn't know was pregnant with his child, or that Ollie's mom paid her to leave Starlight. We've since found out that she's had an 8-year-old boy, most likely Connor Hawke, who in the comics is Oliver Queen's illegitimate son, and goes on to become the next Green Arrow. At the end of the episode, it's the first time we get to see Ronnie Raymond since the accident, and he transforms into Firestorm. Now, it's pointed out in the comments for episode 6 that the man on fire who doesn't burn could actually be Firestorm, and sure enough, it actually is. Moving on to the second half of the crossover, we get to the episode titled The Brave and the Bold, which gets its name from a DC comic featuring Batman where he teams up with other DC heroes. Usually it turns out to be Superman, which factors into this whole Oliver Queen and Barry Allen being a CW representation of Batman and Superman. Speaking of Batman, Cisco jokes about the Arrow Cave and Arrowmobile. Now, granted those are tongue-in-cheek references to Batman again, but in the Injustice books there's actually an interaction between Harley Quinn and Oliver Queen where she actually calls it those, and the name seems to stick throughout that series. The villain featured in this part of the crossover is Digger Harkness, better known as Captain Boomerang. Now, he got his start as a goofy Australian villain for the Flash that fights with boomerangs, but was then moved on to the Suicide Squad, where he actually spent most of his time in DC after that. He's actually more associated with the Suicide Squad than he is the Rogues, so I understand why he was established on Arrow first and not on Flash. In another obvious build to the Justice League on the CW network, someone says that Barry and Oliver are in a league of their own. Obviously, they will be, along with other members, somewhere down the line. When Barry and Oliver go to visit Captain Lance at the Starling City Police Department, Captain Lance accidentally calls Barry Bart Allen. Bart Allen actually happens to be the name of Barry's grandson, who then goes on to be Kid Flash, and then later known as Impulse. So at one point, Lila asks Oliver how's Speedy, and Oliver responds that Roy's fine. She obviously meant Barry, but this is actually the first time I think that Roy was actually called Speedy, seeing as how that was his original nickname in the comics. When tracking down Captain Boomerang, they're led to a location with the cross-breed Infantino. Infantino being a reference to Carmine Infantino, creator of Barry Allen, the Silver Age Flash. Quite often it's mentioned that the Flash is a symbol of hope, which is rather interesting seeing as how they just established the emotional spectrum and how Barry Allen in the comics goes on to becoming a Blue Lantern during the event Blackest Night. So when it's all said and done, Captain Boomerang gets captured and put in the same island prison as Slade Wilson. Now, it's interesting to note that both characters have a connection to the Suicide Squad, and I expected it to be some sort of prison break where both characters escape and end up reforming the Suicide Squad, hopefully with the characters that we've already seen on the squad from the last season of Arrow. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this episode of Flashbacks. As always, if I've missed anything, sound off in the comments below. Leave a like on this video if you're enjoying the series, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you keep up to date with all our podcasts, reviews, and this show. I'll see you guys next time.